Going back to positional play, I'm going to kind of tell you a sort of hand range that you can play in various positions. Now, things like mediocre hands, ace 9, ace 10, something like we've got on table 4 here at the moment, is horrible to play out of position. When you do hit, you're going to face aggression and not know if you're ahead, you're going to lose a big pot or win a small one. It's reverse implied odds, like I said before. Now, ace 9 is bad to play in the big blind, especially when Welchie calls here. I could push all in. I choose just to fold. Seeing as HMR Customs was only $15, I mustn't have seen this at the time. I should have just set him all in, because Welchie doesn't really ever have a good hand, and I don't think HMR Customs, short stacked, has a good enough hand all the time to dominate me. So I should have pushed. But if HMR Customs had a full stack there, which I thought he did, just getting out of the way with ace 9 in the big blind is usually the best, unless you have a very good post-flop game. On the table 2 here I have kings. It's a fairly standard raise, but there was a guy, Stevie Mac, who posted the blind without being in the blind, so he just donated 50 cents to the table for nothing. Because of this, I need to raise a little bit more than I would normally, so I'd normally raise to 3 times the big blind, but I raised to 3.5 times just so that it pushes him, it charges a bit more into the pot, gets him out of the pot with things like 9 deuce and things that I would have no idea what he's got. So it isolates his range a little bit more if he does call. Positionally, I changed my bet sizing, varied on position, not based on my hands at all. So I don't raise a different amount with ace king that I do with 7-6. I raise exactly the same and just base it on positions. If I'm under the gun, I want to charge the other players more for seeing the flop in position on me. So I raise it to 3.5x. So that's 3.5 times the big blind. And then in the hijack or under the gun +1, I make it 3x. In the cutoff, I make it 3x. And on the button, I make it 2.5x. The reason for this is on the button, I want to play the majority of my hands. I have position, so I can take the pot away from them, I can bluff them, I can make moves on opponents a lot easier than if I was out of position. So I want to be have them call rather than fold. So if I make it smaller, they're more likely to call. If you don't have a very good post-flop game at the moment, then by all means just make it a standard 3x or 3.5x on the button as well. Just try and push them out, take the pot down then and there. But I think everyone should learn to play good post-flop poker, and to do that you need people in the pot to own. So you've got to let them in the pot cheap when you've got position on everyone. The sort of hand range you want to be playing on the button is huge. You want to be making up most of your, say, 22-23% of hands that you want to play on the button instead of under the gun. Under the gun you want to be raising only premium hands, or if you're feeling a little bit funky you can throw in some suited connectors and things just to balance your range slightly. But on the button you can be opening as wide as king 4, 7-4 suited. You know, there are so many different possibilities of hands you can open with, purely because you're going to have position on the opponent most of the time. Nearly 80% of hands in Hold'em are won or lost without going to showdown. So therefore, if you're going to be winning or losing those hands without going to showdown, then it doesn't matter what you've got. If you are representing ace king on an ace deuce 5 jack board, it doesn't matter if you've actually got ace king if the other person's going to fold. You could have 9-3, it really doesn't matter. So as long as you have a position on the opponent, then you can start to take them to the cleaners. You don't have to go to showdown. As long as you're good at bluffing and you can put them on a hand range so that you can bluff them off hands, then it really doesn't matter what hand you have. And most people know Gus Hansen for this. He was famous for this. He would play any 2 cards, famously, purely by reading what the opponent had and putting them in horrible situations. Which is what do you need to do in cash games? To demonstrate this on table 2 at the moment, I've got 7-4 suited. Most people would fold this, but in the cutoff, your hand range is going to be almost the same as on the button. Maybe a little bit tighter, but you're in position on 2 players and only out of position against 1 player, so you're really trying to steal the button by raising the cutoff. Now, a lot of players here would see an ace king 6 flop and you've got 7-4 and you know you're out of position. Most players would just give up. They'd just check fold. But c-betting's such a strong part of the game, especially against weak players. And I don't have many notes on Stevie Mac, but I could flip up my notes as I did just then, just to see what sort of how he plays. And I don't have many notes, but I do know that he cold calls with Ace 10 and Jack Queen out of position to a squeeze. So it's very passive. He's loose. He could have anything. His hand range is very wide, but he's not very aggressive. So on an Ace King 6 flop, if I was playing against a tighter player, I would assume that they would have an Ace or a King, calling with King Queen or Ace Jack or Ace Queen in position or something like that. But seeing as he has got a very wide range and is passive because he's cold calling Ace 10 and Jack Queen out of position, then he can easily have things like 8-9, 10-3, all sorts of crazy hands, which I suspect. So I'm going to be able to push him off quite a few hands here, and I would expect that he doesn't have Ace King, Aces or Kings, purely because he didn't 3-bet pre-flop. Even though he is passive, players with premium hands would do that. So I can have Ace King, Aces or Kings in this situation, so I decide to go ahead and rep one of those sorts of hands and see bet the flop. Now, if I didn't have clubs here, I might think slightly different. I probably would still see bet, but I've got there's a 6 and a club on the board, so the turn can bring either. If it comes like a 5 or an 8, then I get a gut shot draw and open-ended or something like that. If a club comes, I can get a backdoor flush draw, so I can double barrel and triple barrel him that way, as well as a semi-bluff. Now on table 1 here, I've got King 9 suited. It's not all that great, and you could just make up the small blind here, because it's only 25 cents. But Lucifer seems very, very weak. Most limpers are, who limp pre-flop. I don't advocate it at all. So I decided to jack it up somewhat, and I could just make it my standard 4 times the big blind raise to isolate, which I would do in position, but that just seems a little bit too little when you're out of position. So I like to bump it up and make it 5 times the initial limp, just so it pushes them out of the pot more, and you look like you can have a very strong hand also if you're winging it 5 times. So you can double barrel and triple barrel a lot of flops and turns successfully with your tight aggressive image. In this hand, I just want to show you the difference between the 3s from a hand that we talked about earlier and these 4s. In the hand earlier, we got a good read that Animalegia didn't have an ace or a king, therefore we were able to successfully double barrel the turn and river with our 4th pair or 5th pair or whatever it was. In this hand, it's slightly different because we're just heads up. Now, Choi Choi is going to raise pre-flop, and would expect him to c-bet any flop, but this King 10-8 flop, he decides to check back. This immediately tells me that he has a medium value hand, something like a 10, or maybe an 8, or a low king, or something like jacks, something that he doesn't want to build a pot with, but still is interested in. If I lead out here, I can only represent a king or a bluff. Everything else is like draws that are going to be missed or anything like that. So it's just going to be a ridiculous spot to bluff in. Hopefully you can see why it's going to be a different spot, and why I elected just to check fold. Choi 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 can have a wide range of hands, whereas Animalegia in their last hand could only have a few hands. The narrower the range of hands that you can put your opponent on, the more successful you can make your bluff. And also the narrower set of hands that you can have, the easier it is for your opponent to put you on a certain hand, which means they can fold and your bluff can be more successful. Now on the top left table, table 1, we've got a nice hand, 4-5 suited. One of the things I like doing with this is calling in position, because you can flop a lot of nice hands, and you can use your position to bluff the opponent. You can float flops. Out of position, you can't do those things. You can't float flops. You can't really make moves as much as you can in position. But the one thing you can do when you're out of position with suited connectors is 3-bet them. Lots of players fold to 3-bets, especially out of the blinds. And if you've got any sort of software that reads, that keeps track of your stats, you can see how often people do fold to your 3-bets and what have you. So I decided that I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this. It plays well in 2 ways. Because I've got a tight aggressive image, when I 3-bet, it looks like I have a premium hand. So therefore, if the flop comes like ace, king, 10 or something like that, I can easily represent a multitude of hands: kings, aces, ace, king, 10s, occasionally jack, queen, things like that. So I can represent big hands then. If the flop comes low, obviously people won't put me on a decent hand. They'll put me on maybe overpairs, but there's less hands for me to represent. So when the flop comes low and I do hit my hand, and hopefully hit it hard, so something like a 6-7-8 flop or a 5-5-6, you know, something like that, then people will never guess that I've got 4-5. Also, seeing as I've got hearts, I can flop flush draws, I can flop straight draws and things like that. So it plays quite well when you're playing aggressively as the pre-flop raiser. So I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet this. As I said before, poker is partially results oriented, but in the short term it's really not. If you're making the correct move at the correct time, then it doesn't matter what the opponent does. And here he obviously has a good hand and decides that he's going to 4-bet me. So there's not really much you can do with 4-5 suited now. Even if I know that Laxey is going to be 4-betting me light a lot, I can't really push, purely because if I do get called I'm going to be absolutely crushed. Whereas if I had something like Ace-10 or Ace-Jack, then I could push knowing that I'd always have 3 outs. So I just make the quite easy fold. But I think the raise pre-flop is still good. If I didn't want a 3-bet here, if Laxey was very, very fishy in a calling station, I wouldn't decide just to call pre-flop. I'd just throw the cards away, because they don't play well out of position when you're playing passively. So when you're playing tight aggressive, guess what? You need to play aggressively. So this brings us to the end of the video. Just a few things to sum up. You know, you need to learn your hand ranges for positions. So under the gun you want to be playing premium hands only. And then on the button, the cutoff, you need to be opening a lot wider. This is so that you can play post-flop poker in position a lot more profitably. Another thing you'll have to learn from when you're coming from full ring or tournaments is the fact that post-flop play becomes a lot more important and a big part of your game. Also, set mining becomes a lot more profitable six-handed. Whereas full ring, people expect you to be set mining, therefore expect a set to come out on the flop. In six max they don't. Therefore you can get paid off a lot more by playing a tight aggressive style, just waiting until you hit a hand and then playing very aggressively. You'll get paid off a lot more. Just a little tip for you there. So I'd like to hear your feedback. If you can get in touch with me, that'd be great at the PKR forums. Let me know what you want to see in upcoming videos. See how I've done, what you would like me to change about my videos. I took the audio off for the PKR on this one, but if you would like the audio back on, just let me know and it'll go back on. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you again soon. Good luck at the tables.